Order, order, and welcome to Evidence Session 3 on the Reforming Jobcentres Inquiry. And it's a pleasure to welcome today's panel. Could we start with you, Liz, and then we'll do an introductions around across the panel, if that's okay.
Liz Sewell from Belina CIC. We're an organisation that supports women further from work to get ready for work.
Hi, I'm Sam Reid and I represent Migrant, and we're a not-for-profit organisation that exists to protect people affected by displacement and exploitation.
Good morning, I'm Abdi, Mohamed, representing Scope. We're a disability equality charity supporting and working with disabled people, 16 million people in this country.
Good morning, I'm Balbir Chatrik from Centrepoint. At Centrepoint we work with homeless young people aged 16 to 25.
Fantastic. So we've all got some questions for you, if that's okay, but I'm going to kick off. And I just wondered if you could describe what the key barriers are to the people that you work with and support to them getting into employment. Who would like to start?
Can I start?
Of course, Balbir.
So what I would say is time and approach. So job coaches really don't have enough time to give to homeless young people, because many of the young people we support, they have been through quite a lot of trauma. So what we need is time for them to work in a trauma-informed way. So it's time just for young people to feel comfortable, to actually be able to talk about, you know, what's happened to them in the past, but where they want to go to in terms of their employment aspirations. So time and approach, but the other one is knowledge of job coaches. And the third one, if I can just slip it in there, is partnerships.
I think for the disabled people engaging with the Job Centre Plus, there's two in particular. There's the complete lack of personalised support for when they come into the job centre. So sometimes they feel like it's going in and it's a 10-minute appointment or very top-line engagement rather than the proper engagement that they need to feel supported into proper jobs. I think that's the first one. The second is the lack of trust. The DWP and JCP more generally, I think, for the longest time has represented a really uncomfortable place for disabled people, a place where they feel like they're being caught out rather than being supported. So the underlying issue of trust still remains, and while we welcome some of the things in the Get It Working, there's still a need to tackle the underlying issue of trust.
Thank you. Sam?
I think for us it's more about, because we support a lot of migrants, people that are going through the process of seeking asylum. They're also people that generally tend to have no recourse to public funds. So just like Liz, we find that some of our barriers just do tend to be the same in how do people access that information in the first instance. The fact that they are told on their visas or they've got documentation that will say that they have no recourse to public funds, that makes them automatically think that they cannot access any services within the UK. So that is one of our challenges as to how we separate that information as to what no recourse to public funds actually means, as to what is a statutory entitlement and how they can access information depending on their situations. So say, for example, a person on a work visa, if they paid into the system and, say, for example, they lose their employment, based on their eligibility, there's the potential for them to be able to gain access to employment support as well as helping them find another role. But lots of people aren't aware of that. To them, it's, we can't access any support. Perhaps there is a charity that can support us with that, and that is one of the challenges that we find. In terms of people that are seeking asylum, they're those that have the right to work. So say, for example, they've been in the UK, their claim has been submitted for a year, and through no fault of their own, they've not received a decision. They are able to look for work, which is great. However, the challenge is that because they've been in the UK for a long period of time, they've been in the UK for up to a year, they can't access ESOL courses until they've been in the UK for 6 months. So we're finding that we have an awful lot of barriers that, depending on what people's circumstances are in terms of no recourse to public funds, they will have different barriers.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. And Liz?
So for women, clearly the key practical barriers are childcare and flexible work, which I think we're all aware of, and I won't go into too much detail around that. We know the government is looking at how it can do both of those in terms of the childcare strategy and workers' rights. Building on what my colleagues here have said, I think that when you're looking at people who are trying to get back into work, they often have more than one problem. So there might be somebody with a disability and a woman and a migrant, maybe a young person too. So I think that when we're looking at barriers, we're looking at practical barriers, but we're also looking at, I think, three key things. One is that people don't have awareness of what's available. If you look at, we work with a lot of migrant women. If you weren't born in this country and weren't educated in this country, you don't necessarily know how the system works, you don't know how to get into training. So there's just a general issue around awareness. Secondly, there's confidence. First layer of confidence is your own personal confidence. How do I feel about getting back to work? But the second layer of that is, do I have confidence that there will be a job for me? That there will be a place. I need flexible work. I need, I can only work 16 hours a week. Do I have confidence in that? And I think that's a real barrier, and it's about how we develop that. And for me, it's about hearts and minds as well as about what you have to do. And then finally, I think it's about a kind of reciprocity of, if we're looking to get back to work, what practical support can be offered to me? And I think, again, reinforcing the points that people have made, the system at the moment isn't working. If it was, we wouldn't be here. Sanctions and a 10-minute appointment every other week or once a month isn't delivering for either the government or the individual. And so for us, it's about engagement. And it's about how you engage that individual person to think about getting ready for work.
Lovely, thank you so much. Frank McNally.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I have a few questions. I'll start maybe with Abdi and Liz, but I have a question for Sam and Balbir as well. Can I ask you, Abdi and Liz, just building on the Chair's question around the effectiveness of job centres and supporting those furthest from the labour market. You've highlighted in your submissions that job centres are not effective with the groups that you described in your answer to the first question. What have you found to be most effective for engaging these groups and supporting them into work? Maybe start with yourself, Liz.
So it's tough working in a job centre, and you've got a very short amount of time to work with a lot of people. And so there's no disrespect to what that people are doing. But also, for both of us, 25% of working age women are economically inactive. That means an awful lot of those will be carers, carers for children or carers for adults. And what that means is that you have a lot of women, far more than men, who aren't even able to access Jobcentre Plus. So I'd like to mention one historical programme that really did deliver, which was the New Deal for Lone Parents, which was a voluntary programme, which was one of the most successful programmes that Jobcentre ever ran. And it was both successful for the individuals that used it and very, very popular with the staff. And the reason for that was because they had agency. So they were working with people who wanted to work. It was a voluntary programme set alongside other sanctioned programmes. And they had agency. They could buy people clothes. I mean, I think sometimes they even, gave people driving lessons. They whatever was needed. In a sense, what was really sad about New Deal for Lone Parents, so we kind of have a relic of it left, which is that it was so good, they made it compulsory. And when it became compulsory, it became a work-focused interview, which is much, much more of a tick box. Have you come in for your work-focused interview? So everybody has to do it. So I think if we're looking at what job centres can do, we need to give those staff agency. But I don't think that necessarily job centres are always the best people to provide support. And I think that, it's quite interesting. If you look at actually what the employability organisations do, people like Ingeus, people like Sure Trust, people like Get Set, they go out and find local partners because they're on payment by results programs, and they know that they need to work with local organisations, with organisations that have specialist understanding. And I think that Jobcentre would really do well to look at what the employability organisations have done to provide those specialist services. And what we know works is building that confidence, giving that awareness, providing practical support. And the issue of time, a lot of programmes are a year. If you're a long way from work, a year is not enough. So we need to be thinking about people having longer.
In terms from kind of disabled disability perspective, I think Scope runs employment services that are voluntary and tailored for disabled people. So what we do is we take time to engage with the same person who comes to ask for our support. So rather than a 10-minute slot, we have an hour slot with them, and from the get-go we talk to them and understand what their aspirations are, rather than just giving them a number of jobs. They have to pick one and go and apply. Actually, it's about understanding and listening to them, and then being able to tell us what their aspirations are, because fundamentally, ultimately, if we get them into a job they're happy with and they engage with, they're likely to last longer in that kind of job. And it's building on that. So then working with them through the process. So from helping them identify their aspirations right through to some of the CV building, some of the confidence building, the very practical parts of it. And we know our services work. So 71% of disabled people we work with are still in employment 26 weeks or 6 months after, which is stronger outcomes than the DWP has. And it's because of the personalised, tailored approach. And it's making sure we give that time for the disabled person to really help them, but also then building on, if they're offered the job, working with the employer to understand their disability. And I think it's not just parting ways once they've got that job. It's really from the beginning right through to when they're kind of placed in the job. And if they need access to work or whatever kind of support they need, is supporting them, because it has to be a partnership between the employer and the employee, but our Scope's here to facilitate that. So for us to improve these services is very much about the tailored approach, which we've proven to work, and it does work.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sam, if I can maybe come to you, in your submission, and you touched on it a bit, in your first question you mentioned that people with no recourse to public funds will still access job centres for employment support, but obviously due to that condition they won't receive benefits. What can the government learn from their experience at job centre support?
For us, we think it's looking at all groups really of migrants. So say for example, the year end in 2024, 38,905 people or asylum cases received a grant of protection. So as of December, well really 1st of January 2025, you've got about 39,000 people added to the employment market. So instead of these cohorts of people being able to just get running with looking for employment, they're actually further behind really in terms of their ability to be able to find work, understand the system and get the support that's needed, because there isn't actually tailored support in terms of people that are coming to the UK as economic migrants, those that are granted the right to stay in the UK as a result of their asylum claim, or those that have the right to work in the UK after 6 months. So for us, there is a lot that we feel that could be done to just help improve those chances, whether it be from integration from when they first come in, or that there's specific packages for migrants in the UK to get them up to speed as to how things work in the UK. So one of the things that I'd just like to add is that Migrant Help, as part of a Reducing Exploitation programme, we've worked together with the Good Works Partnership, and they've basically created an app which is available to all migrants, and it's actually a really good app. It covers lots of different countries, not just working in the UK, so it tells you what your employment rights are, it gives you organisations should you feel that your rights aren't being supported, i.e. you feel that you're being exploited, it gives you the contact details for the GLAA, modern slavery helpline, so it really is a case of trying to let people know who are new to the UK what their employment rights are, because a lot of it, again, as Liz said, if you don't grow up in the UK, you don't know that, say for example, you should be getting paid particular times, you should receive a pay slip. So it is all about helping to reduce that exploitation, and we feel that that is something that will benefit a lot of people, a lot of vulnerable people.
Okay, thank you very much. Balbir, if I can maybe come to you, in your submission you touched on the lack of awareness of staff with specific regards to homelessness. Obviously we recognise the challenge of homelessness, and certainly in my area it's continues to be a growing concern. Can I ask you, what difference you think that increased awareness would make for those who are present in the job centres?
So a couple of things there. One is that there's lack of knowledge in some job centres, some are great, in some job centres about the interaction between benefits and actually being in supported accommodation. And this is something that we've long called for with other organisations, is making work pay. And we're really supportive of the Getting Into Work white paper, so removing the barriers to young people actually being able to work. So if you're in supported accommodation now, you get to keep less of your money than actually if you're living next door, the same age, working with the same employer. So the amount that's disregarded is much less, and you get less money. So what we want to do with homeless young people when they're in our hostels is actually create a work ethic. That benefit is a disincentive to young people actually working. So we've got to remove that, because when they're with us, work ethic, we can support them. So then when they leave the hostels, they're actually in work and they remain in work. So some benefits, some job centres know about this, and so they won't be pushing young people to take any job. Others don't know about it. So they're actually putting young people in a really difficult position where they're actually less well off if they're working. That is not the start we want for young people to have at the start of their working lives. It just doesn't make sense. So that's kind of one bit of knowledge. The other bit in terms of homeless young people is just thinking that not everybody has a mobile phone. Not everybody's got credit on it. So we had Amy, who was fleeing domestic violence, and she had an appointment with her job coach, but actually she couldn't go to it. She couldn't let them know because she didn't have a phone. And so she was sanctioned, which again doesn't make sense. So it's just being aware of the situation that some homeless young people are in.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. David Pinto-Jaczynski.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Liz, I want to start by thanking you for mentioning the New Deal. I worked on it many years ago, and I agree with you. It was a fantastic programme. I mean, look, already a lot of the conversation has begun to home in on one of the central trade-offs between work coaches and staff really supporting people on the one hand and checking compliance, so to speak, on the other. So now the white paper said that checking work-related requirements will move from the foreground to the background of the customer-work coach relationship. How can work coaches strike the balance for the need to monitor on the one hand while simultaneously being a trusted coach and trusted ally to people going through the system?
I think the problem is that when you're very dependent on that amount of money, that is always going to be at the forefront of your mind as a person going into the job centre. And I think that as a direct result of that, it can make those things much more difficult. So I think what we need to do maybe is separate out some of the functions around benefits check. But I think if we fundamentally look at what we're doing at the moment, what we sanction people on is turning up and whether they've applied for a job. And this is actually not a very good way of helping people get ready for work. And I think what we need to do is think about, say, this idea of reciprocity. Now, I understand people get benefits, but they see that as being something that they need to live on. And we don't sanction people if their kids don't go to school. We don't take the benefits away if their children don't go to school. We don't take the benefits away, if they've got a problem with their housing. But with this one small thing about whether you've applied for a job and turned up, it seems to me to make no sense that is such, you can lose such a large amount of money for those two things. So what we need to do is to turn it round into the job centre being somewhere which actually is more to do with its name, it's about can help you get a job. And the focus should be on that. And I think that what you need to do is have different programmes running alongside it. So, for example, group work. So if you look at all the organisations that work with women in employability, Successful Mums, Women's Work Lab, they do group work because that allows you to develop a community and an understanding and thinking about work when you're not focused on that one individual and looking at their benefits and their sanctions, and you're able to get a lot more out from what people need, what you can do for them in a much shorter amount of time. There's something like that where people can actually develop that. I also think the point that we've been looking at in terms of how technology can help. So could we not do a lot of the stuff around, the benefit stuff using AI now, and then look at what we can really do using technology? Things like apps are really good. So we developed our own app because we want people to get information. I do understand some people don't have a phone, but almost everybody has a phone. And if the job centre can get into people's heads by being able to provide information in different ways, we put out a jobs bulletin every week. So people can see that there are jobs for them. We're giving them information every day. It's making that connection, building a community groups. I think it's that kind of work that delivers, rather than sanctions and a meeting.
Great. What do others think?
I think it's about making sure that job coaches have enough time with young people. I do get it. Do you know what? It is something for something. Right. So in a way, what we'd be saying to young people, that's what happens in life. But what I would say is if we want to get young people into careers, not just a job, if we want to raise their employment aspirations, we want a high-skilled economy, what we need to do is help them think about the longer term. Not just about tomorrow. This is young people at the beginning of their work journey, their career journey. So I would say, yes, there's going to be benefits. However, take time to talk to the young person, what are their career aspirations, and talk them through how they get there. Many of the young people we work with, they haven't had a stable family background where they might be talking to their parents and saying, and their parents might be saying, oh yeah, you want to do this is how you might. They haven't had those conversations round the dinner table. They need some time with the work coach to actually talk them through their career aspirations and how they might get there, which is good for them, but also obviously good for the economy as well.
Thank you, Balbir. And can I just follow up on one point and then would love to put it to the other, to Sam and Abdi, which is you mentioned time. Obviously, work coaches are often very time constrained. How would you fit that richer interaction into a smaller time frame? Are there things we can be doing to save time, so to speak, and to lift pressure from work coaches to allow them to have these deeper interactions?
Some of it is you could use partners. So actually use partners. So Centrepoint, for example, actually gets partners to do some of this work. Trusted partners who, in our case, homeless young people, they know and they trust. Get them to do some of the job search, the CV writing with them, for example, the interview skills with them. We have instances where actually job coaches will not even talk to Centrepoint staff. And that just doesn't make sense for anybody, because actually you want to engage the young person almost like at home as well as the job centre, so we need to be working in partnership together.
Just building on that, I suppose building on both your points, there's something that work coaches can actually do, is be trained in disability. So we have 600 plus job centres all across the country, and not every single job centre has a dedicated person who is be fully trained to engage with disabled people. So if you want to, granted they haven't got an hour to do what Scope will do, but maybe have half of that, but actually the first few interactions are really key for engaging with anybody, and actually if I go in and able to understand, I feel there's empathy and compassion there for understanding what my disability is, actually you're beginning to bridge that and you're beginning to build some of that trust. And there's, from the first few interactions, a lot of disabled people we speak to kind of are put off by work coaches or engagement. I quite enjoy a bit of work that Joseph Outreach Foundation and Scope did found that 11% of people we spoke to felt that work coaches didn't have their best interest at heart, when actually if we're going to build that trust and be a bit more time efficient, it's having people who are upskilled and supported. And as part of the Get Britain Working, I know there's a coaching academy, and a key to that should be some of the training.
And can I just pick up on a point you made, Abdi, and I'd also put it to Sam as well. Do you think, especially with facing people with complex needs, a work coach model that is a kind of generalist model, works, or would the kind of disability employment advisor and lone parent advisor model, be a better road to go down, be something we should be looking at?
So I don't think the general kind of support model does work. I think we've seen it in our services when we compare it like for like to the DWP's model. Actually, there are going to be people who need a bit more support because of the complex needs of their disability, and actually that engagement, that proper support, the more wraparound support is, while it can be more time intensive, in a long term pays off both for the economy and both for the individual as well. So there needs to be an understanding that one size doesn't fit all, and actually engaging properly early to understand that would be really helpful.
Great, thank you, Sam.
For us, so part of the way we came up with the feedback as part of our call for evidence that we submitted was that we involved our lived experience panel. So they're basically people who have experience of the services that we offer. They've got experience of the job centres. So a big thing for us as an organisation to help us improve our services is that we involve them in co-production projects, and they're projects that we've worked with them on in terms of the UK Health Service, NHS Engagement Service Partnership, the Scottish Government, and it's about using their lived experience, getting them to analyse, look at services that they use on a daily basis to be able to help us identify where the challenges are, where their voice isn't actually being considered. And I think in terms of the groups that we support, as well as along this table, I don't think that there's any involvement in terms of DWP as to how can these different groups, disabled, people seeking asylum with the right to work, migrants of whatever category, British nationals, to see what is it that they want from the job centre. And one of the things that we came up with was, could there be an assessment? So instead of it being completed by the job centre, it's done in partnership with individuals. Individuals are empowered. So it's sometimes looking at the Scottish flexible work system, that they've got a programme in place. They're not accepting any referrals at the moment, but it's looking at people's interests, their hobbies, the kind of things to see what makes that person rounded, to see what qualifications they have, are there any gaps in their skills. It's looking at all of that, but putting the power back on the individual client instead of it sitting with the job centre, so that person feels empowered to actually help themselves get back into work. And we think that this could work for people that are far removed from the market, as well as those that are very close to it, that have maybe just registered with the job centre, just to give them that gap to show that they have been out of work for maybe a month or 2 months, but they are able to help themselves in terms of searching online. But we think, again, the hub service that will look at providing digital inclusion, digital support, access to technology, and also access to data, because again, that is something that's very key for people with no recourse to public funds, that while they may have access to a telephone, unless they've got that Wi-Fi connection, which is strong, they're never going to be able to complete any forms or support themselves, because a lot of the services have now moved online.
Great. So, and just one final brief question before I hand back. That's very helpful. But obviously we've talked a lot about DWP, we've talked a lot about customers, recipients, vulnerable claimants. We haven't talked about the third leg of the stool, which is employers, because obviously we're trying to... is the system set up, what else should work coaches be doing that they're not doing at the moment to help actually build those links with employers, to not just help coach people, but actually get them in and sustain them in work?
So at the moment, we have good links with our local job centres. So we're based in nationwide, our talent acquisition advisor, she's built up some really good relationships with local job centres. Initially, it started off as 10 minutes that she was invited in to speak to different groups of people to talk about migrant help, the services that we offer, potential job opportunities. So this became a more regular thing, and what she's hoping is that it now gets to the point where the job centre can act as a recruitment agency, where they will have an idea of the skill set of their clients within their groups, or the people that are assigned to them within their cases, and that they can then be shortlisted or presented to us for an interview. So the agreement is, if you feel that you've got relevant clients with the relevant skill set, that they will be guaranteed an interview, and that hopefully that can be built on with other organisations. So it's a case of saying, okay, we're looking for particular roles and helping you plan for the future. But I think one thing I didn't add is that one thing that is really key, just going back to the bit about compliance and whether that can still sit with the work coaches, for us there needs to be a cultural shift in terms of staff that work within the job centres. So a lot of times when we were doing, having the conversations with the people that fed into our evidence sessions, it came back that they felt that there was personal bias in terms of generally people that are claiming benefits, that they're almost seemed to be not part of society because for whatever reason they're being prejudged. But we feel that the cultural shift that will get work coaches to look at people as individuals, regardless of whatever their situation is and their circumstances, will actually be useful, where people are treated with the dignity, respect that anyone would deserve or require.
Conscious of time, so to keep
just a tiny point there is that that is a fantastic central role for the job centre to work directly with employers and to support all the organisations in the area to feed into that. Mm-hmm. And I think for all of us, when you're working with individuals and you're relatively small organisations, actually employers, it's much more difficult. So I think you're right; they are the an essential part of it, and job centres could do that role.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank
you. Amanda Hack.
We've covered a bit of it already. Actually, it's been really useful discussion so far. Obviously, your representative organisations' person-centred approach to employability would look quite different. So, we've talked about it a little bit. Where do you think the similarities could be in terms of a person-centred approach across homelessness, disabled people, migrant help and women? And are there any sort of commonalities between addressing those barriers in a person-centred approach? And I know that sounds a bit of an odd one, but it's actually how do we support progress going forward via job centres, and how does that look?
So we need to have specialist advisors. We need to have in job centres people who understand. We need to have the assessment. People need to be seen as what they are, not turning up as a benefit claimant. They need to be seen for who they are. And I think your point about early and support is really important. I think what's even more important is to have a strategy. So that there is a strategy for dealing with each of these groups. So if I could just give an example, the GLA are looking at how do they upskill people in London. And one of the things that they've done is they've accepted that it's going to be difficult for them to do it. And so they've created a project called Community Outreach, where they fund smaller organisations and relatively small organisations to go out and find people and to work with them to bring them into training. So they're not delivering it, but they've got a strategic approach to delivery. And it's been really effective. So I think it's about how the job centres, I say not, each person as a generalist, if they're going to deal with all of these people, it's almost impossible to do. So specialist support, but also a strategy.
I think I would just add involvement of all of those different cohorts. It doesn't need to be a huge scale project, but if you're not involving the voices of all the different people that we represent, I don't think it will ever be a programme that will meet the needs of the people, because you've not asked those people exactly what their requirements are.
I come back to time, and I think that is essential. So time to actually listen, because you've heard similar things from all of us. So it's actually having that time to listen to the employment aspirations, whoever that individual is. And I don't think, we're not asking for lots and lots of job coaches for each individual group, because really that's not realistic. But it's actually time, understanding, and then just a knowledge is really critical. And they can get the knowledge from organisations like us.
Yeah, that's really useful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I completely agree with one of my colleagues. I think just building on top of that, I think it's, so while it might not be the whole process that we've allowed for the full amount of time, but I keep going back to that early bit where you can build a relationship and you can build that trust, which is, there's a massive deficit in job centres and in DW more generally for disabled people. Actually, that early support and building that relationship to really understand, because I agree, it's not possible to have individualised coaches for everybody, but actually there's, if you give that person time, the respect and understand the listening early to understand what their aspirations are, then you're able to help them kind of achieve that, and that's really important.
Lovely, thank you. Earlier in the panel, I think it was Balbir mentioned pressure to take any job, and you know, and I think the conversations around supported housing and the benefit penalty is well versed. It's something that, you know, that is a real concern. So, what difference do you think it would be removing some of that pressure to take away any job and creating careers? And I represent a rural seat, so obviously additional barriers. If there's any particular, connection to rurality and actually how different the labour market is in rural locations than it is from a more urban location, that'd be really helpful.
Well, I think Abdi's point about retention is really important, because any job actually doesn't work for people, for a lot of people. I understand, I do believe in work, but any job doesn't work. But again, I would say we probably all have this, very high retention rates. And that's because we're looking at putting people into a job that suits them. So that's understanding their motivation, understanding what they want to do. And the reason that is so important is that everybody here is representing people who face a lot of problems. If you put all that effort in to get a job and then it doesn't work for you, you're really pushed back. And I really, when I was at Gingerbread, we really found this, was that lone parents, single parents, if you tried hard and it failed, then you think, well, it doesn't work. So it's that looking for the right thing. And we had, on a very, very comprehensive, no cherry picking, 78% retention rate of people in work, because we'd got them into the right job. But it takes time, and it takes energy, and it takes support.
Yeah. Because in the long run, getting young people into the job they want to do, and the right job, will actually save time and it'll save resources. And that's really important, as I said, particularly at the beginning of their working lives. Can I just talk about employers a little bit as well? I think the other thing for me is that when a job coach refers a young person to any job, what employers are telling us, what employers are saying to us, well, actually, those are not the young people we want. They don't last long in that job. And that means in the future, employers have told us, they're less likely to use the job centre. So actually that doesn't benefit anybody, not the young person and not the employer.
Thank you. Frank McNally.
Very much, Chair. Throughout the sessions that we've been undertaking in this inquiry, there has been a great amount of discussion around some of the cultural and structural challenges within job centres. But I'd be keen to ask you about the physical environment within job centres. We know that they can be intimidating, there can be perhaps a lack of privacy, all these sort of issues come up time and time again. But so what changes would you like to see within the buildings, within the physical space, that you think would make a difference to your service users?
I think for us, or the people that use the job centres that we support, they like the idea of a central hub where it's a large enough space with space or rooms for private conversations. Because, say, for example, we also support survivors of modern slavery, and one of our advisors, when we go out, we wear the lanyard, and on it had that she was an MSVC advisor, and in the job centre, one of the work coaches commented, so to her client that she was with, are you a victim of modern slavery? Now, it was great that there weren't people around, but to give that context, if there was a person who was a victim of domestic abuse, nobody at the job centre would ask, are you a victim of domestic abuse? So it's being able to have private conversations, having that support for coaches so that they know that they have the training to know how to be able to address people, potential circumstances that they should be going through. Again, that there's access to that digital technology, there's the opportunity to interact with different cohorts, not that it's just aimed at specific groups on different days or different times, because there's great opportunity through peer learning. That there's other organisations that are brought in to support with the whole person, so that there's debt management, knowing how to budget, because these are a lot of skills that people may not have. So it's not just important to help people find a job, so to do the CVs, how to do a covering letter, application forms, that kind of thing, but it is providing the additional life skill support that is needed, along with opportunities for training to potentially help them. So say, for example, if you're going to run a mother and baby session, could there be another training session or another provider that could be brought in to deliver some information to that mother-baby unit as well? So it can be a great space that, if it's carefully thought out, is less intimidating, therefore you don't need that security guard at the front door, the high-vis vest, and where people are treated with that respect, that it becomes a safe space. People can expect to spend a couple of hours there, you know, potentially potentially childcare as well, so aiming for those with young children, that they can focus on a session. We think that that would be really useful. So again, just trying to involve as many services as possible.
Just building on that, I think it can be a great space, it could be a safe space, but if you can get access to the building, I think there still continues to be real problems with the JCP estate in its totality of the accessibility issues that continue to be a barrier for disabled people. I've no doubt you all, as MPs here and constituents who might have been sanctioned because they didn't turn up to their appointment, but actually their appointment happens to be on the second floor of a building where there's one lift, for example, and a lift isn't working, and then a wheelchair. So there's still very much problems for disabled people accessing the building, and not just the physical parts of it, but when it comes to neurodivergent disabled people, actually how they're being supported. If you can't actually get into the building, if you can't feel comfortable in the building, then there's no chance of you feeling it's a safe place or it's a great place for you to flourish, and this continues to be there's very much as physical barriers.
Do you know, I want to kind of flip it on its head, right? Is like kind of say, actually we want those job centre plus officers, we want people to be actually saying, I want to go there. You know, what is it? What's going to attract them in there? So we work with a couple of job centres, and they've actually come to Centrepoint saying, we're going to do a jobs fair for young people. Tell us how we attract young people in here. So they come to us, they ask us, they will talk to the young people we work with, and then young people will say, actually, you could, start it at this time. These are the kind of activities. So what we should be saying is, I think is, we'd actually like young people who are looking for jobs to be kind of queuing around the block to get in the job centre, because that is a place where you get the help you need.
So I'm going to flip it one stage further. Let's keep flipping here. There is a concern. So I was in a job centre on Monday, a lovely job centre with lovely people, but there is a kind of silence ethic in there that, and there was a quite young baby crying. And actually it was quite a nice noise, but it's not fair on that mum, it's not fair on the advisors having to deal with that. So as well as having excellent hubs, which we do need, we need to engage in the community. We need to go out to where people are. So we work in schools. We work in Jobs22 did a wonderful programme to fund a community outreach. We worked in Sharma Women's Centre. That's where women are. Women go there already. It's a fantastic place. So there are places that you can go that are set up for women or parents with kids, and they're actually better places. And if you want to reach out to people who don't use the job centre, going to where they are is better, or it will reach more people than only having in-house places.
And where you mentioned rural communities, you could have the same. I mean, every small village will have that one focal point, and it could be that space is used as that area 2 days a week or as is needed. So not necessarily excluding rural communities.
Yeah, I mean certainly we did a recent visit to Glasgow and Manchester, and we visited a job centre in Manchester. It's a fantastic job centre, I have to say. And we also took evidence from the Mayor of Greater Manchester. He spoke quite passionately around the sort of integration of services, and sort of ultimately the co-location of services as well. And I suppose your point is that could be in various areas within communities. But do you think there are specific barriers to that sort of co-location in public services? Do you think people are just locked in their silos? What do you think the barriers are for creating that sort of one-stop shop, that hub model that I think we all
You have to do it, because everybody here represents people who have complex needs, and if you're homeless, actually you need help to get a house as well as to get a job. If you're a mum, you need help to find childcare as well as get a job. If you're a migrant person, you need to understand how the system works. If you're disabled, so without that. And again, I said, that's what, if you look at the employability organisations, they are doing that already. We're working with each other, creating those partnerships. And it's essential. And I think we'd all say that, isn't it? Partnership is essential.
And I'd say maybe visit. We were doing some research, and we went to Oasis in, I think it was Cardiff. Yes, I think it was Cardiff. It's either Cardiff or Swansea. But they run a community centre that is supporting the whole community. And their people are empowered. You had lots of people that were refugees that would go in there, completely different nationalities, as well as people seeking asylum. Or it was also the school holidays. People were just using it as a drop-in centre. And then Migrant Help and other organisations were there providing support in other side rooms. People were there playing games, they were talking, you had different sections just for women because they kind of just segregated themselves, and then they were having knitting lessons or, just talking generally. Then you also had some people from the community that were cooking the meals. So everybody that was there got a meal. You saw how all of these different nationalities, these different cultures came together. And to be honest, that was one of the best vegetarian meals I've ever had. But I think if you could go to these community centres, see them as they are already existing, it is great proof that these hubs wouldn't need any much more to add on to support the people in their communities.
I'd also say I think there's something about not recreating the wheel. There's local authorities, NHS trusts and different parts of government are doing really well. And actually one point of entry where somebody can come in and they're supported by different services and actually not having to go to different buildings or different departments is actually a really great idea, and actually it's person-centred, isn't it? So it's actually I might need help with housing or with childcare and filling in all these different forms. There's loads of different places. Local government, you spoke about Manchester, they do it well and they've learned those lessons, and I think it's on a DWP, it's incumbent on them to learn and take and steal from the best bits and recreate services that work.
And in terms of young people, we've got youth hubs.
Yep.
And so they are working. So you've got young people, they can talk about jobs, employment, training, but also they can get health advice and counselling if they need it. And that really does work for young people.
Okay. I'm conscious of time, Cheryl.
Thank you. Joanna next.
Thank you. So we've touched on a lot of this already, but what do you think makes the best partnerships between local organisations and community and job centres? What makes those partnerships work?
I think it's understanding, just having those initial conversations as to what an organisation's about, kind of future planning as to potential opportunities that will be coming up. And I think if that's how job centres can work, I know there is the intention to continue that with local authorities identifying new startups or organisations within specific areas. I think it's more about future planning, seeing what roles are coming up or how sectors are going to develop. I think that's a key way, just having that ongoing conversation.
I think I'd add something about ensuring you're working with partners, building that conversation. It's understanding that we're not here to be the surveillance for the DWP, and actually it's the respect that we're here. We want a person-centred approach, and that's not then feeding back to the job centre or to the DWP. This person didn't do that, because we've taken a long time to build trust with disabled people, and I know that respectful organisations have done the same with people they support. But it needs to be a respect that, yeah, we want two-way communication, but we're not here to be your surveillance, and actually that fundamentally will destroy the trust that we've spent a long time building.
It's about mutual respect from Job Centre Plus staff and from organisation, our staff as well. And also almost like kind of seeing the view from each other's hill, because we have got constraints. But it's actually saying, you know, and looking at where we can work together for the best interest of the young person. That's when it works best for us and for the young person.
So I think two things. One, I think when you're looking at the kind of organisations like this, we're going to be here. You know, our funding goes up, our funding goes down, but we carry on because we're very passionate about what we do and we believe in what we do, and we've developed evidence for how the things that we do work. I think there can be a bit of hierarchical relationship. We're seen as the smaller partner. Job Centre Plus has the funding, and when they choose to fund things, they very much decide what's going to be funded. Mm-hmm. I think there could be a real opportunity for organisations like us to be able to bid in for things that we think work, because we've got good evidence for knowing how things can be really successful. And so, I go back to the community outreach programme. They have the funding, they have the outcome, you go to them with your approach. And I think there's something there about our approach is being recognised by job centres.
And just conscious, obviously, that as a smaller organisation, you might have kind of come across a number of barriers in engaging with the job centre in the past. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about those? Or?
Yeah, it's a bit like guerrilla warfare. It's like, you know, centre by centre. You'll find somebody, and it's like a lot in employability. It's like with employers as well. Some people get it, some people don't. And so you build relationships. I mean, in Kingston, we have a fantastic relationship with a job centre advisor there who what she does is, she hasn't got money to give us. She connects people. Yep. And it's this thing about, you know, the job centre is there. It's going to be there for a long time. It's building that relationship. And she puts people in touch with each other who can help each other. And again, when you're small, you need that. So it's not always about money. It's about that connection and understanding. And I think it's that partnership of what is the job centre's role. So they're going to be there for a long time. Yeah. Developing that.
So I guess I'm just wondering how we spread that good practice, so it's not just dependent on a particular individual in one job centre or another. My colleague talked earlier about the lessons that we heard from the Mayor of Greater Manchester. So it's definitely not just co-location, but how do we make sure that your interaction with Kingston Job Centre can be as good as your interaction with another job centre? It's not just dependent on that one individual that you've built up a relationship with.
I'm sure my colleagues have got ideas. I think it's about creating a culture that recognises that as something really positive. Yeah. So it would be about, you know, job centres praising people, I think giving awards, certificates, so actually kind of saying, really building up. This is something we do. This is something we recognise.
Just to add, I think as the direction moves to devolution, it's a really exciting opportunity to have more of those relationships and empower those local people to have that two-way communication and build those kind of special relationships. But I think at a national level, there still needs to be some strong guidance from DWP, ensuring there's some universal, there's some standardised ways of doing things, because what might work in one part of the country, not necessarily, but there are still principles. So ensuring there's the proper training for disabled people. Like the key things that the DWP can do nationally that then emboldens and allows them at a local level, move away from the centralised way of doing it, will be, it's a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
And maybe just kind of, even, this is quite granular, right? But actually it could be objectives that people have.
Yeah.
So job coaches.
Yeah.
Part of their objective, one of them, a key one, is actually partnership work. So you demonstrate to me, give me some examples of kind of partnership work, where it's worked and where it hasn't, and what you've done. So that actually will focus individuals' minds and maybe their managers' minds as well.
For me, I was just going to add training, because where the relationships work, in particular job centres, and where our talent acquisition advisor has said the same, she's been able to have those connections because those people are particularly passionate about the role that they do. So again, I think it's not that work coaches don't enjoy their roles, it's maybe they might have lost the focus or the reason as to why they're doing that role. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a case of just kind of maybe going back to basics, getting the work coaches to go through some training, look at the culture and just have that conversation as to, getting them to reevaluate why you're here. Our outcome is really to try and get as many people into employment as possible, because at the end of the day, that's our goal, and that's also the work of the job centres too.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to labour it. It's obviously just culture is such a difficult thing to change from the top, so we're just trying to get all those best practice lessons.
Thank you. 2 questions left, 10 minutes to go, folks, and handing over to David Pintu-Dichenski.
That will be very, very brief. So look, we've already talked about training very briefly. How might job centres better support people to retrain and develop, and how within that do you think careers advice can best be tailored to people? And if you could keep your answers really short so that we could...
It should be encouraged for people to train. So training should be part of that return to work. It shouldn't be discouraged for people to train. And especially the longer you've been out of work, the more likelihood you need to train. So it should be part of what people are asked to do.
Great, thanks Liz.
Training, I don't think it should just sit with the job centre. The feedback that we got is that it should be throughout a person's life. So people are encouraged through school. You start thinking about what those, as was mentioned earlier, what kind of career you want. And it could potentially result in a bit of a policy shift where if you don't go down the academic route, that potentially you could go into a trade, and that there is nothing wrong with a trade. So it's possibly reframing people's perceptions of different careers and maybe putting into place specific programs. We think that would work very well.
Great, thank you, Sam. Abdi?
Yeah, it's listening to the disabled person or to the customer, understanding the training they want, the aspiration of where they want to get to, and then helping them develop that training. So bringing it together, I think, could be a good idea. And again, it's through one door and being supported in doing that, and actually being able to be upskilled in terms of maybe it might be health and safety or whatever it is a chance for them to upskill and be supported into that job. But the key here is listening to the claimant, to the disabled person, to ensure they're not being sent on just a random course because they've said they want to do one thing, but they're being sent on something else because there's no space, and that's key.
Brilliant, thank you, Abdi. Balbir?
So relevant, good quality training that's going to lead somewhere.
Mm.
And we're really hopeful through the Youth Guarantee that's the kind of training that's going to be offered to young people.
Fantastic. And I suppose that leads to my second question, which is clearly the training journey and the support journey shouldn't ideally finish when someone gets a job. So what in-work support would you like to see from job centres to support people and also to help them move on in the labour market? Because of course the best way we tackle poverty is not just getting a job, but a good job and then rising to an even better job.
So 600,000 women are on in-work universal credit compared to 300,000 men. So actually we need to have a strategy, and the reason for that is that a lot of them are working part-time, and I think we need to be realistic that for a lot of those women part-time working is going to be best. So the best way to increase your wages is to change job. That's not necessarily the best way for those women at that point. So I think we need to have a more structured approach to how we support those women to get trained, to develop their abilities to get a better job, a better paying job. So I think it's about really thinking about their personal needs.
Great.
Yeah.
Sam?
To add to that, it would be a case of a person that's in work, that conversation's been had as to where they want to go. If it is a case where a lot of women and some of our people who are single parents are only able to work during certain times, that I've lost my train of thought.
That's what they need to do.
Yeah, basically, but that they've got that conversation. So if it's 2 years down the line, they've still got that light touch. But then when they are ready to go into full-time employment, that support is then ready for them to tap back into, and that would apply to all people seeking asylum or migrants and so forth.
Great. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, I think linking it to, so once they're in their job, it's the retention and staying into the job and progression into work. So actually, if it's the future job that you want is linked to a driving license, helping them and supporting them, I think it's the upskilling which is going to be really crucial, and helping link, making sure they understand this is about your next role, what do you want to do after this, and then kind of the career progression is something that I think makes it easier to kind of do.
Fantastic. And finally, Balbir.
We've got to encourage employers to make sure that they think about lifetime training, particularly for young people. So you've got to involve employers as well as obviously Jobcentre Plus.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Damon Egan.
Thank you. I'm going to build on as a question because I'm really keen to ask about availability of English lessons. I think it's particularly relevant. Sam, Liz, you work with a lot of foreign nationals. We were on that job centre that Frank was talking about in Manchester, a fantastic visit. A lot of the customers at the job centre are foreign nationals, a lot using translation services. But ironically, the English lessons that would get people off the translation services and help them into work aren't available. So I would like to get your perspective on that and to understand how important it is, you think, getting people's English up to speed is.
We feel that it's really important because it also helps with integration into local communities and just to help people settle in the UK and future plan or be part of society while waiting for asylum claims to be processed when they've got the right to work, whether they're a person's spouse on a work visa, so forth. So we feel that it's really key. The fact that depending on a person's circumstances, they may not be able to access ESOL classes until they've been in the UK for 6 months. That is also a challenge because we feel if a person was able to get those lessons from the very beginning, that would help make them ready further along the line.
So if I could just draw on our work in Leicester. We were in Leicester last year. The garment trade in Leicester has really fallen apart because of, in reality, the minimum wage has made it very difficult to make it cost effective to make garments here. There are a lot of women in Leicester who have lived in the UK for a very long time and have worked for a long time, but they can't get a job now because they've never learnt English. So they've got a lot to offer, but without English, it's very difficult to get a job. And the same for anybody. If you don't speak English, so the very first, I mean, we encourage people to do ESOL. We provide an online program for people to develop their English called Daily Steps. I think AI has a big role to play here now. So we've been piloting a project working with the Tamil community in Croydon and empowering Tamil families. And what we've done is we've gone in and we've shown them how you can get a job description, put it into ChatGPT, it'll turn it into Tamil. You can look at your CV, say, or you can actually just say, this is who I am, speak it into your phone. ChatGPT, can you write me a CV? Can you look at my transferable skills? The further away you are from work, and not speaking English is a long way from work, actually AI has a lot to offer you, and it's something that we're really looking at as to see how people can develop that. So ESOL, but also looking at how technology can help.
We'll all be doing it for our questions.
Exactly.
Have you seen good examples in terms of the availability of English lessons? Because I'm like that 6 months where people won't have anything when they've come. kind of think that's the time when someone should be put into a full-time English lessons.
There's so many weird timings. So again, so much of what you're offered depends on a particular thing that you fit into. Oh, you need to wait for 6 months or 3 years, or you haven't been on that program for a year. And this is where people find it so frustrating, especially if they really do want something. And a lot of migrants, so we work with a lot of migrant women, they really do want to work. They've got a lot to offer, but actually they're restricted from doing it because of these particular rules that come in. So it's not person-centred, it's not holistic. It's about, we've come up with some rules because they fit our targets, a culture again, when actually, if we looked at what that person needed, we would say, well, you're not going to go anywhere till you speak English. Yeah. That's what we'll do first.
And is there anyone in that space, sorry to press on it, but that is doing a particularly good job that we might want to look to?
In terms of, sorry?
Like, are there any organisations out there, voluntary groups who are doing this work, or certain parts of the country?
So people doing it very ad hoc.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the problem. There should be a national programme to ensure people speak English.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental, and it should be seen as something. I think your idea of community. So the other thing that you have is, what we find is that if you have a woman in a community and she gets a job, she starts to become a community leader. She helps other people navigate the system, and it can be a really good community builder.
And for young people, it's really essential because there they are living in a hostel at Centrepoint, and they can't communicate with other people. So, and then they don't necessarily understand the culture, which is really important. But with young people, it's a bit easier to get access to English lessons because of their age, obviously. But it is really critical.
And do you work with a lot of people that won't be speaking English?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And so that integration just in the hostel, never mind outside, is critical.
Thank you. And then just in terms of the universal services that are available, what difference would a universal service at a job centre that anybody could access make to the people that you work with?
It'll certainly be less stigmatising. As I was saying earlier on, job centres should be a place where people want to go. I'm going to get a good service there, I'm going to get some training or help thinking about what job I want to do. I'll get access to jobs, employers. So if it's universal, it's much less stigmatising.
And I think it's just knowing that is a safe place to go, where the information you get given will be correct for your situation. Because sometimes what happens with the feedback that we got from our participants and our service users was that they get feedback from a particular work coach, but then they'd get, say, for example, completely conflicting information from their local council in terms of entitlements. So it is a case of making sure that information is as relevant and correct and accessible to the relevant groups.
We need to have a service that is there for... See, people don't know if they're economically inactive or unemployed, and they don't understand why they can or can't. See, one of the things that we say to people, it's a kind of shorthand, but it's a sad shorthand, is we say, do you have to go to the job centre? Because if you do, but it should be, do you get to go to the job centre? And I think that's what we need to turn it into, something that is a service for people, that they really do get something from it.
Just to say, I think it could be a really great idea, but always in everything, devil's in the detail. I think actually, if you're building a new service, you're building a universal service, what we'd really push for is the co-production, so the people who are using it being at the heart of building that service. And it feels almost weird that they're not actually doing that properly, in the sense of, if I go into the job centre, I'm probably best placed to tell you what I want a service to look like, and that's really key. And as long as it is person-centred and the time and the space we've spoken so much about it is given, we think it could be a really good thing.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And that concludes our questions to you. So thank you so much, Liz, Sam, Abdi and Balbir. Really, really informative session. Order. Order, order, and a very warm welcome to our second panel of this Reforming Job Centres inquiry, the very final session before we meet with ministers. And it's a pleasure to welcome our panel here today. Angela, could we start with you and then we'll go down the panel?
Yeah, so I'm Angela Grant. I'm the president of the DWP group within PCS. I've worked for DWP for almost just on 20 years now. So I've got I work for child maintenance. That is my day job, is in the child maintenance service, where we are pushing to eradicate child poverty, which is, going through off the scale at the moment. But have a wider view of right across the department, have a lot of input with all of our members in every single directorate.
Thank you. Martin.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Martin Cavanagh. I'm the National President for PCS. But I've got over 30 years experience of working in and representing members within Department for Work and Pensions, job centres, benefit centres, etc., etc.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Andrew McGregor. I am the Chair of the UNISON Forum on Careers Guidance. UNISON is the only trade union that has such a forum. But my day job is I'm a careers advisor. I don't work for UNISON. I work for a third sector organisation based in the northwest of England. I've worked with young people and adults for 25 years. I've worked on the National Career Service contract. I've worked as a careers advisor. I've worked with adults, and I'll be going back and working in a school Friday. So I work with both young people and adults as a careers advisor, qualified to level 6, and that's my day job.
Thank you. Now, for the interest of transparency, members on the Select Committee are going to declare our union membership. And if we could start with David.
Thank you, and I'd like to declare membership of union in UNISON and GMB.
Amanda?
Unite and USDOL.
UNISON and USDOL.
UNISON and Unite.
I'm a member of the GMB and the CWU, but I should also declare that immediately before entering this place I worked for UNISON, and a long time ago I also worked for PCS.
There we go, so completely transparent about our membership there. Right, so we all got some questions, and I'm going to kick off if that's all right. And I just wondered if you could start with describing what the impact has been of the merger, of the announcement of the merger of Job Centre Plus and the National Careers Service on your members. Who wants to kick off?
Sure, okay, thanks Andrew. In terms of PCS members, a lot of uncertainty. Clearly our members who work in the job centres are central government employees. They work directly to central government, and because there is a lack of detail as yet as to the full implications for any merger, any potential merger, then there is a concern about what that means for their role, about their civil service status, about whether or not there is indeed a job for them in the new service, and whether or not the work that they have always strived to do is going to be doable in any new service. A real concern about localising services to such a degree that actually it will cut right back on staffing levels and staffing numbers, and will become a bit of a postcode lottery. So that's a big issue and real uncertainty.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to add your comments there?
Again, uncertainty, concern over job security, concern over things like 2P transfers. But in the National Career Service, people are employed by a great plurality of organisations. They work underneath a prime contractor, and then often they will subcontract to that prime contractor. So there's concerns over things like funding, and the type of employer can be medium-sized or very small. So those employers need certainty and they're worried, but there's also concerns over things like deprofessionalisation. Will the merger mean that careers advisors lose their identity and become subsumed into a work-focused as opposed to a career-focused service? So I think I'd summarise it over worry over the future, concern over funding, concern who the employer is going to be, and concern over job role.
Okay. Angela, did you want to add to that?
I don't think there's anything I need to add to that. I mean, the uncertainty is the biggest thing for our members at the moment. There is no detail. It's dropping something in, isn't it, without giving any understanding of what it might mean. So, that uncertainty is key for us, yeah.
So my next question, I think probably if we could start with you, Andrew, is how the government can ensure that the careers advice remains a distinct, skilled profession within a new jobs and careers service. And it's something that you've hinted at in your introduction as well. What are your concerns around that, and what should the government be doing?
The government needs to recognise that National Career Service is a separate entity first, and that what it brings to the employment market is distinct and different from the role of work coach, that it's National Career Service advisors are professionally qualified, either at level, they need to be qualified, we would argue, at level 6 as opposed to level 4, that many are. The other kind of concerns are whether they would be generally deprofessionalised, but there's a need for a separate identity within a job and career centre. So a National Career Service advisor would need a room to interview people. They would need a 45-minute interview slot. They would need correct resources. They would need a National Career Service badge, a separate desk. They don't want to be having the same colour badge as a job coach, for example. They need to have all the branding of a separate identity, and behind that identity and branding they need the resources. They need a National Career Service website, they need access to technology, they need access to training, and a key thing that NCS advisors, the organisations like the Careers Development Institute are concerned about are how National Career Service advisors are going to be trained going forward in a new national identity, because at the moment they're trained and qualified through their organisations who employ them. I've already identified there's a multiplicity of those organisations. How under one new umbrella do you keep the professionalism and keep that separate training and that brand? But I think it can be done, and it can be done without too much cost.
Martin, what are your views?
I think we would support that view. I think there is a real danger in our members. One of the reasons why there is so much uncertainty is that what will the new service look like? And we heard from our colleague, especially the colleague on the end before, talking about the culture a lot. I think it's fair to say that probably the culture that our members experience in the job centres is probably very, very different than the one that Andrew's members experience in the National Career Service. And which one will become the prevailing culture in any new service? Or actually, would it be a sort of a hybrid? Would it be a mixture of the two? Wouldn't work. And so I think there is a real concern that the identity of the job centre network will lose its identity, but not from a presentational perspective, but from a real what it's there for, what it's about. And I know we'll come on to the other questions about work coaches and whether it's work coaches or whether it's the culture and government policy, etc. But that is, I think the need to keep that separate identity, our members are telling us that they would share that view.
Okay, Angela.
And I think it's really important for us to understand the difference, though, between a work coach and a careers advisor under the model that we have now, because our work coaches would give anything to have 45 minutes to sit with somebody and speak to try to get somebody back into work, to investigate, to be sort of intrusive, to understand about what that person is bringing, what their skills are, and they have 10 minutes, and it is a conveyor belt of working. So if we could bring that model into our job centres, it would be fantastic. I believe our work coaches would want that, but they would not want to lose their identity as job centre work coaches to be pulled into the National Careers Service. So there's a lot that we can talk about on that. Can't do it here, we haven't got enough time, but those are the main things for us. They are two totally separate
So it's
roles.
different cultures, different identities,
totally, yes.
different services that are provided as well, and how we bring those together. Yeah. Okay, so I wondered what involvement you've had so far in the development of the new jobs and career service, and how you would see this role developing. Who wants to kick off on that?
We haven't had any. We've had no consultation. Nobody has been near PCS to talk to us about anything. We have written to the Minister, DWP Minister, to ask for a meeting. Immediately when she took office, we asked for a meeting. We had a very short meeting with the Minister for Transformation. But for that, there has been no consultation with the union, which is why we really welcome being invited to this select committee. And off the back of our submission, you've invited us to answer some questions. You want to ask questions? That is really good for us, because we need to have that involvement. So yeah, really grateful that I'm thankful that you've brought us here today.
And the real disappointment for us on that is that our members know what it's like, actually both sides of the desk. Because more and more now our members have to claim benefits as well as administer the benefit system. So whilst that isn't necessarily work coaches, it might be a universal credit service centre worker who has to claim universal credit and therefore may have to attend the job centre for an interview. So our members understand the system, they understand what needs to be done, but also, and really importantly, they know what the pitfalls are and what the problems are, and to not come to the union whose membership administers and runs the benefit system was hugely disappointing for us. But obviously we've got the opportunity now. We've responded to the white paper. We're intended to respond to the green paper as well on disability benefit reform. But yeah, it was a huge disappointment.
Thank you. Andrew?
I think there's a key need to involve the PCS with trade unions like UNISON. We are the voice of careers advisors, but I'd want you to involve organisations like the Careers Development Policy Group, the Careers Development Institute, to get the careers element part right, because careers guidance can have a real impact economically. It can promote the skills agenda. To get Britain working, to keep Britain working, you need to have effective careers guidance. And yes, a trade union like UNISON, that we can give a real input to that. But we work in partnership with the other professional organisations like the CDPG, like the CDI, and picking their brains, getting it right in a multilateral approach like that, I think would help bring about a better service that serves the needs of the economy.
Thank you. David Pintu-Dyczynski.
Thank you, Chair. And look, one of the issues that comes up repeatedly is about the balance between monitoring compliance and providing support. Martin and Angela, in your submission, you say that the job centre service should move away from arbitrary engagement targets and sanctions. Given that we have to police benefits in some way, what would you like to see in place of sanctions if people do not meet their commitments?
I think it's really important, and that was a key part of the submission for us, that we should be moving away from punishing people that are now having to receive benefit. We have seen, so many people becoming homeless because of sanction, and I think the DWP themselves had, when they investigated sanctions themselves, they found that they don't work to get people back into work. So why are we still now putting sanctions in place? So what would we want to see in place of sanction? Well, it's a wide spectrum, and there's a lot of debate on this, isn't there? But we should not be punishing anybody, and that is the key. So what would you put in place for us? I don't think we've actually got a policy on this, so it's very difficult for me to speak for PCS. But when we are looking at anybody that is late, anybody that has an accident, anybody that has a childcare issue, as we've heard, somebody that might, a disabled person that can't get to a job centre, why would we need to put something in place for those people? We shouldn't have to. We should just have to say, pick up the phone, tell us you can't make it, we'll rearrange your appointment. So I don't feel that we should have to replace sanctions with anything else. I do understand that there is a place for anybody that just does not want to engage with the job centre, and what do we do with that? it would, for me, and this is a personal thing, this is not PCS, as I say, we've not got policy, why would we not have more of a 3 strikes and you're out? Give somebody chance to attend, not just say...
But so you would then maintain sanctions? Then?
I would not, I don't believe that we should...
No, but 3 strikes, what does your out mean then?
3 strikes, and then we have to put something maybe in place to make sure we are visiting homes, knocking on the door for somebody. We have visiting officers in DWP. We've lost a lot of our visiting officers. So why, how do we know why that person is not attending? When I say 3 strikes and you're out, I'm not saying that is to implement a sanction. What I'm saying is there is a way for us to there is something for us to investigate in that, is what I'm saying. I don't believe that sanctions work in any way, shape or form. If we believe that somebody hasn't turned up for 3 appointments, I believe that they will be off-boarded from the department. And there's a lot, I don't know if you've got any questions on off-boarding, but that is when somebody is, when DWP have got somebody into work, or they just disappear from the books. They are off-boarded. What has happened to that person? Are they at home? Have they become homeless? Are they at home ill? We don't know, do we? So I think the off-boarding comes into place more than putting a sanction in place for anybody. Right. But I think off-boarding is something we need to look at as well, because that is a very, very dangerous thing, I believe, to just leave somebody off-boarded without knowing where their future, where they are.
Thank you, Angela. And Martin, do you have anything to add on this?
Just in terms of that, I mean, I think select committee after select committee has debated sanctions over the last decade and more, and I think every single one has shown that sanctions do not work as an incentive to get people into work, and the reasons being, and I think Angela has covered it, is that sanctions primarily, the way it's operated, certainly for the last decade, is more of a cultural thing. And let's be frank, the culture is to try and get people off benefits as quickly as you can. It's not about providing support. It's not about trying to get people into a meaningful employment so that actually they can develop their careers and have a long career in a workplace. It is about trying to see, right, as quickly as we can, how do we catch somebody out and how do we get them off the benefit books? And that is how the sanctions regime has become operated. That is the culture that is expected. And I'm going to say it's the culture expected by government. And if it's expected by government, it'll be expected by ministers, and therefore it'll be expected by the senior departmental figures and departmental managers. And that is a far cry from the sort of service that Andrew would want to see. And when we say what else could we have, we know and we understand that actually it comes back to this time issue. If our work coaches were given the ability to provide a bespoke, individualised service to benefit claimants, we generally believe your sanctions would go through the floor. They would disappear, because you would be able to see who is trying to dodge the system and who is genuinely just falling foul of the system. We don't have that time. Work coaches don't have that time. And I was very taken with a number of the comments from the first session, where coaches have lost their identity, where coaches have lost their focus. Where coaches haven't lost their identity and they haven't lost their focus. They've got frustrated and they've lost the ability because they're not given the ability. They're not given that time to provide that care and individualised service.
And building on that, how should DWP determine who does and doesn't have an in-person interview? You talked before about Angela, about the conveyor belt as part of a botheration programme almost. But then again, back to that question, well, given that, how should it be determined in your view?
I think we've proven through the pandemic how in-person interviews are not always necessary. And I think when we gave our work coaches, when the department gave work coaches empowerment so that they could decide who should be brought into the job centre for interview and who would have, could have a telephone interview, I think our work coaches are very well trained and skilled in understanding who needs to attend and who does not need to attend. And certainly anybody that has a disability should not be forced into a job centre. Again, we heard our colleagues earlier speaking about the accessibility or the lack of accessibility in some of our job centres. We should not be demanding for anybody that has a disability to be attending job centre if they can have a video interview, if they can have a phone call at home. And certainly we shouldn't be demanding anybody with a disability to come into a job centre under any kind of health journey because they are sick, because people with disabilities are not sick. They shouldn't have to present with doctor's notes and all those kinds of things. But our work coaches are very, very highly skilled in understanding those, if somebody needs to be in person or can have a telephone interview.
And can I just ask a quick follow-up question on that, and be interested in your views too, Martin, which is some commentators and some analysis suggest the reduction in face-to-face interviews has contributed to much lower offload rates from benefits, that basically they're not as rigorous, that there are issues with them. How would you respond to that?
I don't know if I agree that it's the for home telephony interviews. I don't know that. I've not heard that figure. Okay. That's quite new to me.
I mean, just on that, I mean, but we will happily supplement the evidence we give today in writing. We'll take that away. But in terms of the substantive question, I think what is there sometimes a lack of understanding is that our work coaches understand their client base, but they understand their communities which they serve, because our work coaches live either in or near the communities that they serve. They understand whether somebody needs a face-to-face appointment or how often they need a face-to-face appointment. They understand whether or not an individual would be better off having a telephone interview, but they're not given the autonomy to make that choice. And you know, we see what we call a tick and turn. I don't know if that's been come up, where literally people are told attend the job centre at X time on X day. They turn up, they don't even get to see a work coach. They go, "Are you reported?" Right, fine, thank you. Bam, see you again, same time next week. It's appalling. It's appalling. It's unnecessary. And that's because the work coaches don't have the ability, the autonomy to make those choices. If they did, our work coaches have shown, and I mentioned the pandemic, we were inundated with our work coaches telling us during the pandemic, this is the first time in 20 years, some of them had worked there, that we're finally been allowed to provide the supportive service that we always wanted to give, and we can do it on the telephone. And yet, they were still open. They were still open face-to-face despite the dangers. They came into work every single day during the pandemic, and they were providing that face-to-face service where it was necessary, but they found ways of providing a really excellent first-class service, and they were lauded for it. What's changed?
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Baxter.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about the pressures that work coaches are under. So how can the government free up their time and their capacity to provide that personalised support that they want to provide?
I think two things fundamentally. Number one is we need an increase in work coaches.
Yeah.
I think the National Audit Office report recently said that last year between April and September we were 2,100 short on work coaches. We believe that's a conservative estimate. We believe the figure is higher. Our understanding is that we've currently got somewhere in the region just short of 25,000 work coaches throughout the UK. That is implementing a system that is chaining appointments, literally chaining appointments. If you gave us the correct staff, if the funding was there to give us the correct amount of staff, and where coaches were given that empowerment, we believe that would free up so much time. For example, if you've got a work coach that is instructed that they have to see one individual claimant every single Tuesday at 11 o'clock for the next 10 weeks, when that work coach knows that they might see them on the first Tuesday, they might need to see them again for another 3 weeks, another 5 weeks, another 6 weeks. That frees up that slot, that frees up that time for that work coach to do A, other cases, but B, maybe work on finding the employment from that first interview. At the moment, they're literally going from one appointment to another, one appointment to another. So freeing up that time slot, but fundamentally, we do not have enough people working in the job centres.
So totally take the point about trying to get rid of that sort of conveyor belt approach and making sure that work coaches have got that time. But if you're saying that 2,100 number is an underestimate, what do you think the real figure is in terms of the number of staff that would need to be recruited to give work coaches the time to provide that support?
PCS has long held a view that just for the work coach role, we would need a minimum of 30,000, Now, that would be movable because obviously that would depend on where we're at with unemployment rates. It'll depend on whether or not we have, surges in the economy or flatline of the economy. So there's a whole load of factors that come to try to work out exactly how many work coaches you need. But we believe just to provide the current service and free up the time for work coaches to provide a more bespoke service, we would need a minimum of 30,000. So that's probably around about 6,000 more than we've got now.
I think also we need to stop this job centre closure programme that is running at the moment, because we need more job centres, not less. And we are seeing a mass closure of job centres. You know, I'll give my branch where I work on the Wirral as an example. When I started, we had 5 job centres in our district, and that some are out in the, we're here to talk about you asked the question about the rural area. One is sort of going back into the back of the Wirral, which is very quite farmland and goes into quite a rural community. We now have 3 job centres, and 2 of those that were closed were in those further out areas. So anybody from that community has to now travel further to get to a job centre. That is not helpful. Going back to sanctions, if somebody has to travel, whatever their own circumstances, they can't get to a job centre and they don't turn up, then they're sanctioned. And our members are told to sanction somebody if they do not turn up. Why would we not give somebody the opportunity to come up on the next appointment or come up on the next appointment? And if they don't turn up for those 3 appointments, then we think, well, what is have they gone into work? Is there something that we need to know? But I think we have to understand that we cannot do the job without the staff and without the officers. We have to have job centres in every single community. Otherwise, we cannot deliver a service.
Just on that, very, very quickly, I mean, Angela gave the example of the Wirral. There was a job centre in Hoylake in the Wirral, which wasn't a big job centre, it was a small job centre. However, the cluster of job centres, they use that office as the office to send people, certainly with mental health issues and serious mental health concerns, because it was a quieter environment, it was a calmer environment, and that was a really beneficial service that they provided. It was one of the first job centres to shut. Yeah. And so people who needed that more bespoke, quiet service were all of a sudden thrown into the mix of the bigger job centres and all that comes with it.
So I'm going to come on to the career service in a minute, but I'm going to focus just on the work coaches again. What do you think could the government do to make the work coach role a more attractive profession? If you're saying we need to recruit an extra 6,000 work coaches, what is it that the government could do to make that an attractive profession for people to go into?
Remove the stigma. Remove the stigma from our job centres and from our members. Stop talking, this rhetoric about scroungers and, shirkers. Why would employers want to come to our job centres to dip in that pool where there is so much skill and ability in our, let's not say claimants, let's say client base, in our client base, those that are looking for work are badged as shirkers and skivers? Why would employers want to come? And why would anybody want to work in the job centre? So to be badged in that way, and then to look at the fact that our executive officers, work coaches are executive officers, and they are bordering minimum wage. Our AO staff, the admin grade, are now on the national living wage, and our EO staff are pennies above the national living wage. Why? If you can go to work in Aldi without the stigma and without the pressure, why would you want to come and work in DWP as a work coach? We have to fix that. If we want to have a service that works, government have to fix that. We have to remove all of the bad practices and the rhetoric that came from the previous administration, and we have to do better. If we don't do better, we will never have a better service.
And do your members, do you think, get sufficient training in their roles to provide that sort of person-focused support to claimants at the moment? Or is it just the numbers, the caseload, that's the issue?
I think we always need more training. I don't think there's ever enough training, but our members are trained in their role. I heard before, again, the colleagues earlier talking about how sometimes there's a bias within the job centres. What we need, as well as the work coach training, we need to ensure that every work coach is having proper public sector equality duty training from day one. If we don't have that, biases will happen. Because, DWP, it's a microcosm of society, isn't it? We have people from all different walks of life working in our job centres. We have good and we have not so good sometimes. But they're PCS members, they're all trade union members, and we can do the work as a trade union trying to put our training in place, but it's not for the union to be putting that training in place for work coaches. It should be government, and this is why we talk about this being centrally managed. You know, it terrifies the life out of me that this might move into local government under the Metro Mayor remit, because that does give us a postcode lottery. Who has what training? Who has what funding? You know, how will our work coaches be? Work coaches in this area, they might be trained differently to work coaches in another area because there isn't enough funding to put the training in place. I heard you asked before about how we can get that best practice right across the board. The best way to do that is to run it centrally, isn't it? To make sure that everybody is receiving the same from central government and from a central base. So, yeah, long way of answering that question.
I mean, I guess the challenge there, though, is that making sure that you have those national standards, but tailoring services to the challenges of each local area, and it's getting that balance
It's
right.
important to have the local input. You know, again, we've talked about employers, haven't we? Our work coaches know which employers are in which area, and they reach out to employers. I think one of the earlier colleagues said something about, you know, the work coaches need to do better engaging with employers. We try to engage with employers. If they don't want to engage, what do? We have our jobs fairs, we invite people in. And, you know, I went to an office once, just as an example, and there was a jobs fair, and there was an army truck outside. And I came in and I said, what's this? And they said, it's a jobs fair. The only people that had turned up were the army to recruit. Wasn't an employer. And that was on the Wirral. And you think, why can we not, why are employers not coming in? But again, it's back to the stigma, because I've spoken to accountants and they've said, well, we can't, you know, people don't want jobs. And I've said, of course they do. The job centre's full of people that need. And I said, have you been to the job centre? And they go, well, why would we go to the job centre? Because there is a stigma attached, and we have to remove that stigma.
Yeah, and there are examples of really good work that's happening to break that down. Yeah. Certainly, my local job centre in Paisley is doing incredible work on that. But just if I can turn to the career service, the committee previously heard that the funding only covered one in-person session for people referred to the service. So is it realistic for a new jobs and career service to be a universal service and still provide quality careers advice under that model?
You need to fund more than one session, and the sessions have to be for people who are both at a distance from the labour market and close to the labour market and in the labour market. If you want a successful economy, you have to promote skills. Skills can be promoted through effective careers guidance. And if I'm employed, I don't just want to go to a website, I want to see a careers advisor, because a careers advisor can properly analyse my skills and come up with an action plan to help me move forward. That needs funding for a universal service. But you would be amazed at the barriers that people face who are not in disadvantaged groups. I've helped people who were very senior staff who were made redundant and found it very hard to get back into work. And I can think of people who I've helped who needed 6 or more sessions, and that was a senior manager. But everybody took it for granted he could get back into the labour market himself without any help. One session, and often that session might be focused on a CV, and we're not the national CV service, we're the national career service. We don't just do CVs, thank you very much. I can change somebody's life with one session. I can do an awful lot more with 3 or more sessions, and that's what's possible, that's what can be done, and that's what's needed, and that's what will make an economic impact. Academics like Professor Tristram Hooley have done the research. They've shown that effective careers guidance can have an economic impact. So please put steps in place so that not just the real deserving socio-economic groups that you heard earlier this morning get help, but there is a universal service so the local government worker who wants to change career wants to change job into the health service, the health and social care worker who wants to move out of health and social care, the leisure and tourism worker who wants to change and go into business administration, that those people, those normal people who are working part-time, full-time, they can be helped through effective careers guidance, but that needs more than one session.
And I think in your submission you had said that there was too much generalisation and not enough specialist support. So how would you address that? Should there be more specialist advisors, like disability employment advisors and the like?
Yes, many careers advisors can cover many different groups. So as a National Career Service advisor, myself and my colleagues could often cover a wide range of different occupations, but there's still a need for some specialism. For example, yes, there's a need for specialism for people with disabilities, health conditions, because the skills there, the careers guidance emphasis is different, but also people who are working, and including people who are professionals, they can often need help, and they can often fall out of the labour market, and the skills involved as a careers advisor working with the higher end groups are again different. Now, not every job centre needs a specialist. You can refer a person who is a professional or has higher skills to the local regional specialists. So there are methods that you can do it, but most careers advisors can deal with a wide range of economic groups, but I would definitely argue there's a need for specialisms as well. I've been the only careers advisor who could work with certain types of adult client group across significant geographical areas, and that again can have economic impact. If you can if a careers advisor with the right specialist skills is available, that can be for a working person or a non-working person, they can change their lives through a skilled careers intervention.
Can I just interject? I mean, I appreciate you're focusing on the particular cohort in terms of when Joe was asking about specialist advice. What about sector-based specific advice?
Yes, that's definitely relevant, but it's just that I think you've got to have a mix. You've got to have a careers advisor who can cover a wide range of occupations, but there are careers advisors who are specialists in, say, SEND issues, but there are also careers advisors who cover the health sector. They cover, but I'm particularly thinking higher occupational groups that I would argue there's a need there. So the straight answer to your question is yes, there needs to be sector-based specialisms.
Life sciences on Merseyside, that's a massive industry, and all, from entry level all the way up to...
Yes. And we mentioned Hoylake. I live in New Brighton on Merseyside. At one point I covered Hoylake Job Centre, and I worked alongside the job coaches, and I saw the fabulous work they did, and I saw the pressure they were under, and I thought, I'm very glad I'm not working as a job coach. I'd far prefer to work as a careers advisor, and we need to recognise the valuable work that job coaches have done and the pressure that they've been under.
Yeah.
That wasn't planned, by the way.
It's a small world. And just finally, what opportunities for training would you like to see for careers advisors in the new Jobs and Career Service?
I think that's careers advisors often working on the National Careers Service contract are qualified to level 4. UNISON would argue that to train them to level 6 gives them a deeper level of knowledge, skills, understanding. It enables them to better work with things like labour market information. It gives them a more person-centred skill base. So I would argue the careers advisor, the minimum qualification really should be at level 6. And National Career Service advisors have been doing a fantastic job at qualified at level 4, but at level 4 there's an emphasis on employability. As a level 6 advisor, I can go into much greater depth and understanding. I can draw on a greater knowledge base, but I have to be trained at that. There is I would be concerned that there would be a shortage, for example, in rural areas, as to how you train a level 6 advisor. In Scotland, in Wales, in Scotland, you have Skills Development Scotland and a very deep skills base and training system that is arguably an exemplar in the UK. Careers Wales has an excellent system. In England, it's such a patchwork quilt. And we either need to properly qualify on regional careers training for careers advisors where organisations, for example, like the one I work for, can tender into, or we have a national system that lays out quality guidelines and you work with professional organisations, people like the Careers Development Institute, to come up with professional standards that exist already. And you have a national training programme for careers advisors at level 6, so they've got the proper level of skills to make a difference and contribute towards the economy through training.
Really helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Hack.
To come back in on the training, sorry, there's something that I did omit to say, and it was about the length of time that we have for training. Because I'm just writing a note to Martin Nursery, do you remember this? And Martin's like, no. I've been told by a lot of members that were in job centres before that when they had training, they went in for a good few months training, and then they went into they called it a nursery. I don't know if that's a proper name or that's what they said, but like a nursery where I suppose like a bit of a probation period on their training, but they were still in training while they were there. And I think the fact that the training time has been reduced now so far, there's no time to embed before we are thrown out into the workplace. Yeah. So I think it's important that, as well as making sure we've got the adequate training, we have the time for new staff, new recruits to come in and train.
If you're able to provide any more follow-up information on that,
definitely,
that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Now I'm handing over to Amanda Hack. We have to move on, sorry.
Thank you. I mean, we've heard an awful lot today. Thank you so much for your contribution so far. About the environment within a job centre, and I visited my own, and we obviously have visited one in Manchester and Glasgow as well, and all actually were quite different. But we also heard from the previous panel around co-location and whether or not different kinds of community hubs, community venues might work. So with that in mind, looking at increased co-location, particularly with the job centre and the career service, but also with the approach maybe of introducing more third sector organisations. What concerns do you think that might raise with your members, knowing we've already got a lot of uncertainty already?
I think for PCS members, then their experience of co-locations is very, very mixed. There is some that just have not worked, and I think the reason that they haven't worked is it comes back to this sort of the culture of the job centre. You move then into like a one-stop shop or a colo site, and the expectation of those service users who come into that colo site are very, very different depending on what they're coming into that co-location site for. So if you're coming in to get your benefits sorted because actually you've been sanctioned and you're on the breadline, you haven't got any money, you're going to come in there with a very, very different response than somebody who's going to come in to try and find either a community-based service or some advice around your council tax or whatever it is. Very, very different environment, very, very different environment. And our members' experience is that certainly in the sort of inner city colos, then they are being real hotspots for incidents, and not enough security, real concerns about proper safety regulation, etc. And it's not because the people inherently who are coming in to do the DWP bit are inherently bad. They just have certain frustrations, and they have a life, a lived experience that isn't a good one for them at the moment. And the importance of the environment, therefore, is absolutely critical. I think there's too much emphasis placed on, if you just sort the environment out and make it look nicer, it'll solve all the problems. It won't. Mm-hmm. You can have something that looks like an army barracks, or you can have something that looks like the most pleasant doctor's surgery you'll ever be in. But if what you're going in there for is a really problematic issue for you in your life, you want to understand that the service that you're going to get and the help and support you're going to get is what you need at that moment in time. So the environment is important, there's no doubt about that. and certainly we've got examples, really good examples, where working together with local authorities, working together with the third sector. I think a lot of the time there's a misunderstanding that where coaches have this sort of mentality that is very focused on the person in front of them, and that is it, get out in 10 minutes. But actually there's a really lot of good outreach work, really a lot of good outreach work going. You know, job centres go into the communities. A real shame again in the Merseyside area, the Toxteth Job Centre was closed, say the Liverpool Lake community. They actually had a community centre right next door to them, and the work coaches used to come out of the job centre and see people in the community centre. It's right next door, but they did it because actually that was a better environment for the customer, for the claimant, than it was to go into that job centre environment. And it was closed, and all of a sudden there's a trek from there into Liverpool City Centre, etc. So there's really good experience of co-locations, there is, but probably a better experience of outreach work, genuine outreach work, where job centre coaches can go into more relaxed environments, hubs, etc., community hubs in particular, that provides, and all of our members tell us that really does give it gives a good service, because it puts the emphasis on the support for the individual, and they feel comfortable, they feel as if they're in their environment rather than being forced to go somewhere else that is seen as hostile. I can imagine if I got a letter these days to say if I found myself unlucky, I found myself out of work or disabled, whatever, and I found a letter saying, like, you've got to go report to a job centre, knowing the environment that it is, I would look forward to it.
And from the career service point of view, obviously there is that challenge of co-location with Job Centre Plus colleagues, but also maybe with third sector. What's the sort of sense with the career service?
Well, when it's often in a job centre, the National Career Service Advisor is in the desk in the corner. And that's no disrespect to my PCS colleagues, it's just the way it is. There's no confidentiality, there's no proper way of working, and things like that need to change. But I would argue that National Career Service also needs to do outreach work in the community, in libraries, in places where it is now, with training providers where that offer swaps. So the National Career Service is not just in the job centre, and that the new Jobs and Career Service has an outreach component, so that NCS advisors are also working with employers. They're seeing employed people on employer premises. With co-location, you've also got the issue of physical space. You've got to share your space. You can't have every community organisation in on the same day, because job centres are small spaces under lots of pressure, and there's a great deal of pressure of job centre staff to be friendly, welcoming, and sort all the physical issues out of having visitors in who are providing a service. So you've got to think of space, but National Career Service advisors need to be based in jobs and career centres, but also beyond that in the community. The obvious place is libraries, book community centres. I've got colleagues in the NCS who they go to a whole variety of different settings, and that needs to be kept so that you can stay close to the community and get the best possible service to clients.
Okay, thank you. And just moving on, we've received lots of submissions with regards to the presence of security colleagues in Job Centre Plus. And that may create an intimidating, an unpleasant environment for some claimants. So what do you think is needed to try to get a better balance between the environment and what people go in for might not necessarily be a positive one for them, and create a more welcoming, positive environment for other claimants that might need that?
I mean, Angela, I'm sure we'll want to come in on this. Look, the security guards who work in job centres have got a really difficult job to do. And without any doubt, if it wasn't for the security presence in job centres, what is already a massive increase in serious violence and incidents in our job centres would be far, far worse than it already is. That's the first thing to say. But we also understand, and our members have also been very clear with us, that actually we get how intimidating that can look. If you turn up at a job centre and your first interaction is with a security guard who's dressed as if they were a prison officer, for example, then is that a welcoming environment for somebody to come into if they want to find work or talk about benefits or whatever? No, it isn't. But it is a real catch-22 for us right now, because our ideal scenario would for us to be able to have a much softer frontline security presence, and they're literally there in the background to be called upon when needed and if needed. I think experience has dictated over the years that because of the environment and because people quite often come into a job centre expecting a hostile environment, and therefore they are geared for that. That is their mindset when they come into the job centre. And certainly if something's gone wrong with either their benefit or they can't find work and there's a frustration, we get, and our members absolutely understand that people get frustrated and frustrations come out sometimes. Security guards are imperative then. But we have to try and strike that balance between that becoming an intimidating and a blocker for people feeling welcome coming to the job centres. There's no easy answer to it, because if I was working in the National Career Service now and I thought that actually this new service was going to be put in this new environment that hasn't got the security that a current frontline job centre does, and we're all going to be chucked into that mix, if I was a member of the National Career Service, I would be thinking, oh my God, what am I going to walk into every day? And our members do, and they're used to the security presence. So it's a very fine balance, but we understand it. We're not blind to it, certainly not. But we understand that we've got to find a way. The ideal scenario, we find a way a softer presence, but it comes back to the culture and it comes back to the sort of benefit system that you run. And it is a benefit system because we want to see people given support and coached into work and into a career and careers. But while the emphasis is take any old job to get you off the benefit books, it's that that creates the hostility. It's not the security guards. It's not even how they look. It's that environment, and the environment and the culture is all part of that parcel. People will have a premeditated view about what to expect as soon before they go in there. And I am not saying that incidents don't kick off in there, because they clearly do, but that's born out of frustration.
Yeah, and just to follow on from what Martin has said there, I think the timing of interviews is always also a problem, because if an interview runs over and then the next one runs over and somebody is sitting waiting and they have their own frustrations because they're waiting for payment and they've gone to the bank and their money's not in and they're waiting. We have fast track incidents that are reported to us in DWP, and they are the serious incidents. They're not all of the incidents, they are just the serious incidents. And DWP are telling us, well, the fast track incidents aren't as many as they were. That might be the case, but the actual levels of violence are massively increasing in our job centres. We can give you some, examples that would actually, they're terrifying. Somebody, not even in the job centre, somebody had their car set on fire on their front lawn because they are a work coach in the DWP. A baby threatened in a pram because somebody is really frustrated. So we see these, and we are creating a dossier of fast-track incidents to present to the department and to the Minister if we can, just to show how difficult it is for our job centre workers and for our security guards. So our security guards are having to put their bodies in between our members and this violence that is escalating. And there is no, and as Martin says, this is born out of frustration. This is not somebody just saying, I feel like going to have to kick off in the job centre today, I'm going to go down and threaten them with a gun or a knife. But these things are happening because of what has happened with the benefit system. Anyone that hears me speak says it's a benefit system, but there's no benefit in it for anybody, because to be on the poverty line and to have to, because universal credit now covers housing benefit as well. So if you can't pay your rent because your rent is so high, you have to take the money out of your benefit to put towards your rent. You are living in poverty. So if your money doesn't go in, you might not have eaten for weeks and you want to go to the job centre, your money's not in the bank, so you go in. The frustrations are there and the flashpoints are happening. But just talking about the environment, as Martin said, about turning up on the doorstep of a job centre and you see the uniforms that are facing you, that in itself can be quite intimidating. And I think there might be something maybe, and we've talked about this, raising this within PCS, looking at how we can soften the appearance, maybe speak to the provider, the security provider. Let's bring them in-house, in-source it, and that's key for us as well. And if we can in-source our security guards, we can then look at how you know, what their uniform, how they present. There's something for us to look at there, I think.
Unfortunately, time has run away with this. There is another question that we have about how we would measure the success of the new Jobs and Careers Service. But I'm going to invite you to write to us on that if you wouldn't. But I just want to say a big thank you to you all for coming along. Reacquainting yourselves, I don't know which, but it's been lovely to take your evidence. Thank you very, very much. Order, order.